I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. I well remember them, and my soul is downcast within me. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. For his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion. Therefore, I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him, to the one who seeks him.
Couple of things. If you sit way up here and you don't see what, it's like controlled chaos back there. Man, I leaned over to this and I said, man, I'm glad it's y'all and not me. Man, these kids are running like ants on an anthill after that money. And wouldn't it be wonderful to have the spirit that those kids have when it comes to our money? Man, they don't care anything about whether it's green. They don't care. They're running up here to put it in that bucket. That's all they care about. It's amazing. Something else, we could never figure out, Jim and I tried to figure it out, but standing behind this thing, I don't know if it's the same one or not. We're not sure. But 40 years ago, I stood behind a pulpit just like this. It may not have been this one, I'm not really sure. It feels like it. And the very first time I'd ever have to give a speech for a group, there was 300 people here in that auditorium over there before we built this building. And I still remember the text. I still remember what I said. And I still remember how scared I was. I was terrified. I still get nervous, but not terrified like that before. Wow. And it's just surreal for me to stand behind this thing. Of course, we kidded Cole and everything about we're going to have to build a stool for him and everything because he could be too short. And, we kind of ragged on him a bit. Lee and I and Tim, we kind of ragged on him, and Jim. But it really is neat to have this thing here. Thank you, Jim. I know they thanked you last week. Thank you so much for all the work you put in on this thing. It's really awesome. Really is. Anyway, if you see the text up there, the title up there is Why Me? I don't know where you are right now. I have no idea. But I know that at some point in your life or some point in somebody's life you've gone into a deep, dark place and very easily could have gotten to the point where you looked around you and said, why is this happening to me? I don't know, like I said, where you are. I've been here before. I know what happens when you go to this place. I know what can happen when you go to this place. I know the feeling sorry for yourself. I know the anger and the rage and the venom that you feel, the depression and the anxiety that can happen because you look around at the situation, you say, I don't deserve this. Why me? If you have been in a relationship where the relationship is blown up as a husband or a wife, you understand. It can very easily get to that place. If you've lost children, you can very easily see how it can get to that place. I was there when I was in that room when that baby was struggling to breathe. And I watched my son and my daughter-in-law. And I'm thinking, why is this happening to us again? Couldn't you find something else to do than do this? So it's very easy to go there. And I knew at that point I had to make sure that my son didn't go to where I have been before. I don't know, like I said, where you are, but I can pretty well bet that somebody in this room or somebody watching us online is either there right now, gonna be there really quickly, or has just gotten up from there and said, why me? I'm going to look at two particular people, not people so much, but I'm going to look at two texts this morning, very short texts that we're going to look at. And I want you to see what happens so that you're going to come to a point at some point, instead of asking me, we're not going to go there yet, but what if? What if? Because from our perspective, things that happen bad, they can be chaotic in our lives. It can be overwhelming sometimes to get to that place where we look around and say, I don't deserve this, how dare you? I've shaken my fist at God and said, I don't want to serve you anymore if this is what you're capable of doing. I've been there. And I know how quickly it can unravel in your life. And so I'm going to take you to two people in the book of John. Most of you will know these texts. And then I'm going to take you to another text in another book. I'm not going to tell you where yet, but I'm going to take you to these. The first one is in John chapter 9 is where we're going to go. And it's John chapter 9 and verse 3. Now I'm going to tell you the story here, and most of you know this story. This is a story about a blind man. Okay? And the blind man has been blind from birth. Now, I want you to picture the blind man. I want you to try to put yourself in his shoes and ask yourself, what is this guy's day-by-day routine? Sitting on a corner with a tin cup waiting for pennies and listening to all the people go by. He's never seen them. He's only heard them. He's only smelled them. He's never ever seen them. But he's heard them talk about their lives. He's heard them talk about their loves. He's heard them talk about their children. He's heard the children run by. Do you think it's possible that at some point in his life he said, why is this happening to me? Why couldn't it have happened to one of them? Why me? You think that's possible? Absolutely, it's possible. And Jesus comes along and says, what does Jesus say? They ask, that's what they ask him. Who sinned? This guy or his parents that he was born blind? Been really hard for this guy to sin to make himself be born blind, don't you think? That's how ridiculous this argument is. But Jesus comes along and he says in verse 3, nor his parents, and said Jesus, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. My text says that God might be glorified through him. Think about that. Think about it. You're this blind man, and you have been born blind. You've been blind from birth, and you know if you heard what Jesus just said, God made you that way. So 40, 50 years later, he could make you not blind anymore to show his power. Does that seem fair? Does it seem fair to you? Does it? No, I won't. The first time I read it, it didn't seem fair to me either. I'm going, wait a minute, what? I got another one. I want you to turn just a couple of chapters to chapter 11. This is about a dead guy. Okay? You know about this guy too. This guy's name is Lazarus. And I want you to look at the dead guy. I want you to look at the two sisters. Okay? And the two sisters are Mary and Martha. I suggest you go read both of these texts and look up these things and see what happened. But these two sisters have called for Jesus days ago. What did they know? Jesus could save him. He's sick. In that culture, he dies. They're in trouble if they don't have another man to take care of them. And so here is Jesus, and he said, gets this message from Lazarus, and he said, we're going to wait another couple of days. By the time he gets there, it's been 4 days that he's been dead. And when he gets there, he says in chapter 11 and verse 4, when he heard that Jesus said, no, this sickness will not end in death. It does end in death. He dies, guys. No, it is for God's glory so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Wait a minute. Hold up. Have you ever sat where Mary and Martha sit? Have you? Have you ever sat under the cloud and the umbrella of death and grief and dying? Have you? How did that feel? How did it feel? Did it get to a point where it's despondent? Can be grief-stricken. All people grieve in a different way. But when you bury babies, it's a whole nother ball game. Whole other thing that happens when you start burying babies. And I've sat under that cloud of death and grieving. And I can only imagine, I know what these two are going through. The grief that they're overwhelmed with. Jesus comes along and says, he ain't really dead. This happened. You let us go through this point. You think that Mary and Martha at some point said, what? I would have. I did. I did ask that. What? Are you kidding? I'm watching my daughter-in-law in a hospital room look at her husband and say, can we take her home? And it broke my heart. And to know that all of this happened for a reason is hard sometimes to grab a hold of, isn't it? It is. It's hard. I'm going to take you to another one, okay? This one I'm going to have to tell you a story, but I wanted you to look at two places where God said, wait a minute, this didn't happen so that they might be grief-stricken. This didn't happen to make this guy blind and make his life miserable his whole life. This happened so that God could be glorified. Okay? I got another one. This one's a story about a young girl. Okay? This is a story about a young girl named Esther. Her name is Star. That's what it means. Her name means star. And I'm going to tell you the story of what's going on here. I highly suggest you read this story if you've never read it before. It's only 10 chapters, and it's an awesome story. But I think it's going to help us to look at this whole perspective, why me, from a different perspective. Some of you already know where I'm going to go. But I'm going to tell you the story because I know some of you don't know this story. Esther's got a cousin named Mordecai. And Mordecai is a religious, godly man. And he cannot abide in a particular guy that has given him a problem, whose name is Haman. Haman hates Mordecai because Haman wants Mordecai to bow down and kiss his feet, and Mordecai won't do it. Now you have to understand this is in a time frame of the Babylonian captivity. Now it's not Babylon anymore. Now it's Persia, and there'll be another player in this whole game. His name is called Xerxes. You ever heard that name before? There was a whole movie written about a guy with this name, named the 300. You remember that? This same guy, the king of Persia. Well, Persia has taken over Babylon, and they've taken on all these slaves. Well, these slaves are still in Persia, in Babylon, which is now occupied by Persia. And Xerxes is the king. And Xerxes, one day, throws a party for his friends. And he has all the people, all of his good buddies there, and they're doing what kings and good buddies do. And at the same time, his wife, Vashti, throws a party as well for all of her friends. And Xerxes gets to the place where he says, you know what? I want y'all to see my wife. Man, she's a beautiful woman, and I want her to parade around here so y'all can see just how beautiful she is. So he calls for his wife Vashti. And she says, no, I'm not coming. It's not something you do to the king. But she does it. And Xerxes is past mad. He's belligerent. He's angry. And so I'm trying to simplify this story up some. But anyway, what happens is he makes an edict that from now on, if you are called by the king, okay, you better come. And if you come and are not called by the king and he doesn't want you there, you're dead. And he signs it with his ring, like that. Seals it with his ring. That's done, set in stone. Well, now here comes Haman again, and Haman hates Mordecai. So Haman goes to the king and says, you know what, king? There's a group of people here that they're just anarchists. They're just terrorists. They're just no good, and we need to get rid of them. And Xerxes said, okay. And so he gives Haman his ring, and they seal it, stamp it. It's done. Haman has the power to eradicate the Jews from Persia. And Mordecai finds out about it. And he goes to Esther, because Esther now has become part of the harem of Xerxes. Not only part of the harem, but he has taken Vashti's crown away and given it to Esther. That's how much he loves Esther. And Mordecai comes and tells Esther what's going on. And he says, you need to go into the king and you need to plead our case for us. And she said, I can't. Don't you remember? If he doesn't want me there and he doesn't honor me with the gold scepter, he will kill me. I can't go. Please don't ask me to go. Okay? And Mordecai hears back from Esther, and this is what Mordecai says. Guys, put Esther chapter 4 up there. This is what he said. This is what Mordecai says back to Esther. Says, when Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone, of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? How do you know that you haven't come to where you are? Burying babies, losing a wife, losing a husband, losing a job for just such a time as this. That God's got a plan. What if it's no longer why me, but now it's what if? What if this is really what God's doing? Are you going to bet that He's not? Are you going to bet that He isn't got a plan? He doesn't have a plan for your life and for something else. Man, we're going through some stuff, aren't we, right now in our culture? Aren't we? Yeah, we are. Do you think God's got a plan? Guarantee it. Guarantee God's got a plan. Are you ready to wait? What if the plan? I don't have any idea what it is. I have no clue. But you know what? I didn't have an idea when we were burying baby after baby after baby. I didn't have any idea then either. And what I did was went to the negative part and said, why us? And dwelt there for too long. And then I look at Esther, and Esther says, I can't do this. And Mordecai says, how do you know that you aren't here for just this time? How do you know that God doesn't have you ready right now for something great? And you're going through this struggle, going through this nightmare in your life, and God's already got it taken care of. Are you going to say, this isn't fair? Why me? Are you going to say, what if He is? What if He is? What now? What is that going to mean in my life? What could it mean? Let me tell you what happened. I'll finish the story. What happens with her? Okay? So she says, you're right. She says, would you do something? Please pray for me and fast for me for 3 days. And me and my court will do the same thing. We'll pray and we'll fast for 3 days. And then I'm going in. And they do that, and she goes into the king, and the king is overjoyed to see her. He can't stand it. He loves her so much. Can't stand it. So he puts to her the gold scepter, and she says, what do you want from me, Esther? He said, I will give you up to the half of the kingdom. This is a Jewish slave girl. Okay? That didn't want to go do what she just went and did. And he said, I'll give you up to the half of the kingdom. She says, I want you to come be a part of a feast with me tomorrow. And oh, by the way, bring Haman with you. And he comes the next day and he says, Esther, what do you want? He says, I need you to come to bring Haman with you. So the second one comes and he says, Esther, please tell me what you want. I'll give you up to the half of the kingdom. She says, what would you do to someone who would, and she kind of maps out part of what Haman's doing. And he said, he deserves to. He says, he did it. Haman, in the meantime, has built a gallows outside of his house, 75 feet tall. You know what his plan is? He's going to hang. That's what they use it for. To hang Haman on it. God's got a plan, folks. Then he puts out an edict, and she said, this is what his plan was, and he says, from now on, all these Jews can arm themselves. They can arm themselves with weapons, and because he can't take away the edict, it's been signed with his ring. So all he can do is put another edict together. So he puts another one together and says, now they can defend themselves. And the Jews annihilate those people and save the Jews from utter annihilation. And it's all because of Esther. How do you know that what God may have planned for you today, tomorrow, next week, could save someone's life from destruction? What if? We're going to sing a song, and I want you to ask yourself, what if? God's really in charge right now, and I know, because I've watched it happen, He is. I want you to ask yourself that. What if God is waiting for me to say, okay, do whatever you need to do? What if He's waiting for you? And you've been wallowing around in the why me so long that there's no way that you could come to what if on your own. God's here. God is with us, and God's got a plan. And the plan for you I guarantee is greater than anything you can imagine. And if the what if says, yes, I'm going to do this, it's going to change you from why me to what if. And absolutely. So as we sing this song, I want you to ask yourself, what have I been wallowing around in and not being what God wanted me to be? And do I really believe that God is real and can do the things He promises He can do? I'm telling you, He can. I've seen it in my own life, and I've seen it in many of yours. He can fix this. He can fix our country. He can fix our world. He can fix our state. He can fix our city. He can fix this church. And He can fix us as individuals. All we got to do is let Him. Let's stand and sing and say to Him in this song, I'm going to let you fix me.